Hi, Hala.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
And welcome to everybody joining me now for home office. It's really a pleasure to have you watch this show with me and my guest, Hala. I'm very happy to have you. I think you're really the example of someone who made it in podcasting. So let's get started with your experience from someone who worked in corporate and tried a lot of things and made it to a podcast with many followers. And how did you make that happen?
Well, you know what? I started my podcast as a side hustle. So I started it 4.5 years ago while working at Hewlett Packard. And it was right before podcasts really took off. I mean, it feels like everyone nowadays, especially since COVID, launched a podcast, right? So it was right in that time where podcasts were mainstream. There was a lot of big podcasts, but I saw an opening. I felt like there was no females in this business and entrepreneurship and self improvement space that were really doing it in podcasting. And so I thought, hey, I can be that girl. I've got experience in radio. I used to work at a radio station called Hot 97. I used to have a blog and I've written thousands of blogs. I had experience running social media sites. And so I had all this like prior experience. I mean, I had 4 or 5 shows before Young and Profiting, but they were online radio shows, the precursor to podcasts. It was music based. And so I kind of just took all those learnings and transferred it into podcasting. And so when I launched my podcast, it had traction right away because I had so much experience that my first, second, and third episodes were actually masterpieces. They were really well done. And I spent a lot of time making them. And so I had fans from the very beginning and I grew it, very organically. It was pretty slow growth until year 2 when we really took off.
Yeah, and I watched some of your episodes. You were having some guest stars also that came to your podcast, which is excellent. Do you think that helped? How did you manage to get such, I would say, in demand type of people?
Yeah, so I was getting big guests even before I had the downloads. Because I was doing podcasting before it was cool, right? So I would approach like my favorite author of all time is Dr. Jack Schaefer, and he was episode number 1, and Dory Clark. They're two like pretty big names, and that was episode number 1. And I just approached them with a compelling story. I said, hey, I've never done podcasts before, but this is not my first rodeo. I used to work in radio. I had, a YouTube show. I had a Facebook show. I had 3 or 4 music shows before this. I almost got a show on MTV with my blog site. I had a lot of success with that. And so I gave them my track record like, hey, I've never done this before, but my previous track record is pretty great. So take a chance on me and one day I'll pay it forward. And somebody like Dr. Jack Schaefer has been on my show 4 times, and I've referred him to even bigger shows. Like he's been on my mentor show, Jordan Harbinger, which is like one like top 10 podcast in the world. And he took a chance on me. Then later on, I made it and helped him. Right, so it's just like this little flywheel effect.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about the this movement of people know. I think if you work in entrepreneurship, especially, you know that helping each other helps everybody. That in the end, it's going to improve not only the other person's life but also your life, because it's about giving in the end, and it's about sharing. So I've seen that also with my experience when I invite people over, and there's always this working together and really good vibes basically in helping other people.
100%. And I feel like a lot of these guests, like they appreciated that I was a young woman. I was even obviously younger than I am now when I started my podcast. And so they're like, oh, there's this like young girl. She seems pretty smart. She seems like she's doing innovative things. I want to support her. And I reached out to them in an innovative way. So I was reaching out in LinkedIn DMs. And I don't think a lot of people were doing that back then. And so people were on Twitter and Instagram, but nobody was reaching out to them on their LinkedIn. And so I had this like instant access to directly speak with people like Robert Greene, Chris Voss, Stephen Kotler, some of these huge early guests that have come on my show. And that was I just did it all through LinkedIn DMs. Now it's saturated. So you got to think of the next way to reach out to people. If in fact Twitter is a good way, because Twitter is sort of dying down and now people pay attention to that. You'd be surprised, right? I'm a huge LinkedIn influencer. I'm not reading all my LinkedIn comments because it's like it's like you glaze over it after a while when you get hundreds of comments on every post. But like, I'm so obsessed with like who's messaging me on Twitter because nobody's messaging me on Twitter. So it's just weird when you become like when you start to have a community on a platform, you start to pay less attention to the one where you're getting a lot of traction, and you pay attention to the early ones that you're trying to make it on, or like different ones that are slower. So that's a good tip for anybody out there trying to reach out to guests. See where they're not having traction and reach out to them there.
Exactly. I think that's a great tip because it's always a question for people who are starting out. How do I message people? Where do I find them? And I help some people with that as well, trying to get started basically. So that leads me back to you went, and the title of this show, which is really from tragedy to triumph. So you went through a bunch of hurdles, and it seems like at some point then things changed. And what I was curious to know is what happened. Is it your mindset that changed then, or is it something external that happened in your life, a mixture of everything, to go from maybe trying different things and then one day it just works?
Yeah, I mean, I think my journey has been really filled with ups and downs. So I don't think it was just like down, 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 and then up. It was just like a steady flow of ups and downs. So I think best place to start is 19 years old, you know, newly in college, couple years. Was doing well in terms of extracurricular activities in college, but was totally failing out of school because all I cared about was being in sorority and cheerleading and plays. And at the time, I was obsessed with the law of attraction. And I'm Muslim, but I was never religious. And I almost felt like I had no religion. And so when I went into college and got exposed to new ideas, I learned about the law of attraction and I studied it like it was literally my religion because I had no religion before and I was like craving it. And so I was obsessed with these two people, Abraham and Esther Hicks, and they had all these CDs and I would listen to them on repeat and I would read every book. And I almost like got into this like law of attraction type cult, and I literally rewired my brain. I would say affirmations every day. I would tell myself how beautiful I was and how I was so confident and how I was going to be famous. At the time, I wanted to be a famous singer. My natural talent has always been singing. So I was writing music. And then I had this bright idea. I'm going to push my music at the radio stations. And so I'm going to apply for my junior year internship, and it's going to be only at radio stations. And so I got this job at Hot 97 as an intern. I crushed it, and I did so well that they recruited me to be Angie Martinez's assistant, who was the number one voice in New York. She had the biggest show in America called the Angie Martinez Show, and I ended up being her assistant producer. And it led me to drop out of school. I dropped out of school, college, for a year and a half. I was failing anyway, so I was like, whatever, who cares? I'm gonna like follow my dreams. And that's when I first got in love with broadcasting, and I changed my career path. I wanted to be a singer, and then I realized I don't think I'm going to beat Beyonce or Rihanna right now, but I think I could be the next Angie Martinez. And so I switched paths and kind of, I always wanted my voice to impact the world. So same outcome, different path. And I decided to pursue radio. And so I did that, and I worked there for free for 3 years. And I busted my ass, and I quit school to do this. And then they fired me 3 years into it when I asked them to get paid minimum wage. And a job opened up, and they wanted me to train some guy who was 2 years older than me how to do the job I was already doing, and they were going to pay him and keep me as an unpaid intern. And I got fed up, and I kind of like made a stink about it. I got fired, and that was it. My whole identity was crushed. That was definitely one of the lowest points in my life because everybody knew me as Hala Hot 97 on social media and college. Like that's what I was known for. This girl that had this amazing job and met all these celebrities and things like that, and worked at at the time, Hot 97 was like such a big deal to work at. And so I got fired. That was devastating. I'm not one to kind of sit on my laurels. So right away, I had a new idea to start the sorority of hip hop, strawberryblunt.com. I went back to school. Within 3 months, that website was one of the biggest hip hop and entertainment news sites in the world. We were hosting all these concerts and parties. The same DJs that wouldn't pay me minimum wage started calling me up to host parties with them. I was on the flyers with them, started getting paid by them, and kind of like hop, skipped, and jumped over would have taken me 10 years to do in just a few months because I started my own path and created my own lane with this website. So that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in rejection is that when somebody is telling you no, In my case, it was, the HR director at Hot 97 saying, no, we're not hiring you. I decided to just quickly create my own lane and create my own path with the sorority of hip hop. So another big failure, and then I'll shut up for a minute because I know I've been talking on and on. But you asked me about my failures, and I have quite a lot. I started this sorority of hip hop, and we were crushing it. I did it for 3 years. I was an entrepreneur. I had 150 girls outside of this blog organization. We used to host parties, have radio shows, and MTV scouted us the last year and shot a pilot with us all summer. And it was actually a TV show that was going to launch. And then they pulled the plug and they didn't tell me why. And it was another one of those moments where I was like, damn, maybe I'm not cut out for entertainment. And that was the first time that my naivety about how life is limitless and this law of attraction and you can create your own life, that was the first time that I was like completely broken. And so MTV dropped the show and I was broken. And I basically, quit everything. I shut down the blog. I got an MBA. I wanted a corporate. And for 4 years, I was just a normal person working corporate. I did well in corporate and got promoted. But it wasn't until I, got the itch back and I started the Younger Profiting podcast that I went back on this journey of extraordinary success. I could have just stayed complacent in that corporate job, but I'm very thankful that I didn't listen to the naysayers and that I went for it and started the podcast.
Well, it's a combination of, what do I have to lose after a while, and you only get to try things and see what works and what doesn't in the end, and learn from it basically, and keep trying. And I think the tenacity is what really comes across, that you don't take no for an answer and you keep trying until something will pop up and work. And that's exactly what happened. So a mix of mindsets, training yourself, training your mind, and also not taking no for an answer and keep going for what you want.
Yeah, and to answer your original question, I think you asked me a question about like how did you, make it in podcasting? It's a very hard thing. Like where I'm at in podcasting is like, 0.001% of people reach that point. And I have to say it's because I'm obsessed with it. I learned every single part of the industry. There's so many podcasters out there that don't understand like how to market their show, how to acquire subscribers, how to retain subscribers. They don't understand the way to measure those things. And they're just not absorbing themselves. And even when I had a full-time job, I was obsessed with it, and learning the ins and outs and making sure that I knew how to make it in this industry and then taking like relentless action. So little action every day, recruiting a team to help me amplify my actions. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been successful in this industry.
Yeah, and surrounding yourself, which is a little bit the entourage, and
yeah,
and also finding the right entourage in private life is important, because if you have the negative people, it can really slow you down as well.
It's a really great point. One of the things that I feel like really helped elevate me is that I took a great networking approach. I was the glue that stuck a lot of podcasters together. So when I was first coming out, I remember I would reach out to any podcaster I saw kind of making it on LinkedIn. I'm known to be one of the big podcasters on LinkedIn specifically. And I recruited them all into a WhatsApp group. And I said, hey, guys, let's support each other's stuff. And let's hop on a mastermind call every month and give each other tips. Now, at the time, I was like in the middle of all those podcasters. And then soon, like just learning from all of them, I became the top podcaster out of everyone. And I was also the glue that stuck everyone together, and became an influencer within this podcast community. And then similarly, I reached out to Jordan Harbinger, who's like one of the top podcasters in the world, and basically willed him to become my mentor because I'm like, he's the only one that knows more than me about podcasting and I need to learn from him. And so I did everything. I worked for free for him. I followed up with him for a year and a half so that he would become my mentor. And now he's literally in my Slack channel. I talk to him every day. He's one of my best friends and he's taught me so much. And so it's so valuable to get a mentor who has already been where you want to go. I think Jordan has accelerated my career 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's important what you're saying. So know what you want, focus, be obsessed with it, and also find the person that's already a step, where you want to be, and get that person as a mentor. What I've seen with entrepreneurs is that sometimes the hard part is knowing exactly what you want to do, especially at the beginning. Do you want to be more of a podcaster? Do you want to be a YouTuber? Or do you want to So sometimes it's not quite clear. So I find the hard part to find a mentor is defining what it is that you want to be exactly. And then once you know this, I think it's a little bit easier as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also realizing that if you want a really top mentor, you have to be an attractive mentee. Jordan would have never taken me on as a mentee had I not shown that like I studied everything that I can on my own. Actually, Jordan, I have stuff I can teach you. You teach me the old school way, I'll teach you the new school way. I had somebody yesterday asking me if they can be my if I can be their mentor. I'm a very busy person, and I literally was honest and I was like, "You know what? Unless you want to intern for me at Yap, no, because I think there's way too much you can learn on your own and you haven't taken the initiative to learn it on your own first. I want to be that last stop when you're like, hey, I've exhausted all the resources online. I've exhausted all the books. I've exhausted all the podcasts. I've got questions that I know you have the answer to. I think I can help you too. I would love to like start to have some calls with you and get to know you better and see if you can help me on my journey. That's a much more attractive thing to a mentor.
So I guess that leads me to my next question is why do you think people stay small in their trade, that they become maybe sometimes complacent? Again, is it a lack of reaching out to the right people? Because in the end, why are some people making it and others don't? There could be a formula there where people who make it tend to show certain behaviors. One of them would be a little bit what you're saying, learn everything, become obsessed. But then there's also some people who might say, I don't know if I can make it, and they're not quite sure on what they want. Where do you think the issue lies?
I think it's competency. So, like I said before, you need to love it so much that you just love learning it, whether you're getting a reward or not. So, for the first 2 years, very slow growth for me. But I was consistent. I learned everything about it. And whether I was being rewarded or not, I gave it my all every single day. And it was because I thought it was so much fun. I was so passionate about the topic and I was just fully absorbed in it. So, number one is having the competency, which then gives you the confidence so that when you are in the interview, you do believe in yourself, you know that you've done the work, right? Then I also think it's this concept of insanity, doing the same thing that doesn't work. There's way too many podcasters out there that have like 1,000 episodes and still no listeners. You would think at some point in their journey, they would have altered the way that they're marketing or the way that they're conducting their podcast, and they would have tried to figure out how to pivot and make it work. For me, for a while, all I cared about was Apple, right? And I was having good growth. I was big on LinkedIn, so I would get this organic following from LinkedIn, but it wasn't anything that impressive that was going to really move the needle for me. It wasn't until I was like, you know what? Screw Apple. I'm going to go a different approach. Apple's not featuring me. I have no SEO in that platform. I'm getting nowhere concentrating on Apple. And so I reached out to Castbox and Player FM and all these other apps, and I said, hey, I'm an influencer on LinkedIn. I'll promote you on LinkedIn if you promote me in your app. And then all these apps started sponsoring me. And now, fast forward 2-3 years later, I have 260,000 followers on Castbox. I have 80,000 followers on Player FM. I've got, followers on YouTube and all these different apps. And I've made it in an innovative way. And till this day, I'm not even that huge on Apple. I still have a lot more I can penetrate on Apple. But there's not only one way to make it. And people get focused on one path and they don't realize there's multiple paths to the end goal. And so I've been very flexible to those paths. Another example is I never wanted to be the CEO of a marketing agency. That's just what fell in my lap and what I realized I could make a lot of money doing to accelerate my end goal, which was to use my voice to impact the world and be the number one female podcaster. And so I launched Yap Media 2 years ago, and immediately when I launched it, it was successful. It's a social media and podcast agency. Most of my clients are the guests that come on my show. I listened to the demand that was out there. My guests would tell me at the end of the show, can you do this for me? And I'd say no for years until one day I was like, what am I doing? These famous rich people want to be my client, and I'm telling them no, I should turn my interns and volunteers into paid employees. So I turned it on and started making money immediately. And then all of a sudden I was able to invest in my show like the big dogs. I was able to have a real team that was paid and full time. And it just totally accelerated everything. But being the CEO of Yap Media was never in my plan. but you've got to capitalize on your opportunities. And I feel like a lot of people just stay on one path and they're just blind to everything else. And then the other thing is that they don't believe life is limitless. If you don't believe life is limitless, you don't understand. Not you don't understand. If you believe life is limitless, you're not going to see the opportunities that are around you. And so you also need to shift your mindset. To your point, you mentioned that you need to shift your mindset to believe that life is truly limitless and that you can achieve your ultimate goal. You need to know what that goal is, but you can't be so focused on that one path. You need to be willing to make changes to get to your destination.
Yeah, basically be open to opportunities and sense when there's chances to do maybe things that you didn't expect to do, just like CEO of a media agency. I think that's extremely interesting because working with people, especially in Europe, there's this big bad mark on failure. So people are very afraid to try things because then, you know, the doors might close, or there's this fear of trying some things. And we see that with you, it was actually very enriching in the end. It's what took you to do the podcast. It's what took you to become a CEO of your agency. So I wish, and that's also why I wanted to have you in my show, is I wish people would really embrace that and see that there's other ways, and we don't have to be stuck in, oh my God, we can't fail, it's forbidden, and just free up. And that's really what my mission is about, is to help find the way towards freedom, and that people can see a little bit beyond their sphere, and try and take a chance in doing something new. And the great thing is that you don't know what happens. Just like when I contacted you, you know, I didn't even expect an answer, to be honest. And next thing I know, we're talking to each other. So that's what I mean by trying and just taking a chance, and having the faith that you will find something for you.
I mean, what you're saying is really powerful. Like just having the courage to ask. I feel like everyone's like, how did you get this? How did you get that? I asked. And so many times people told me no, but 10% of the time they told me yes. And all those little yeses add up, you know, and just don't be afraid. And the other thing that I would say is that it took me a long time. You know, I look really young, but it took me years. It was so much work, so much ups and downs. And I was working on Young and Profiting podcast, and it took me like 2.5 years before I actually quit my job. You know, I was doing this as a side hustle. Even my company, I started as a side hustle. And so I took a very risk-free approach. I waited until I had 30 employees before I quit my corporate job. And I knew that it was a safe decision. So I'm not by all means saying, you know, jump out the window and start a podcast and you're going to be rich. Like you've got to do the work, but you can do it on the side. If you're passionate enough, you can find the time.
Exactly. And now you're a CEO. So what I was curious to know is, how did you get started to hire your first employees, and how do you pick people? Because it's really interesting also to see maybe there's different ways to find the right talent. We're still in Europe very much with the resume and the cover letter. But I think now there's a big movement where companies are also looking at alternatives, and we see a lot of videos, CVs, and also interning for companies. That could be a great way to get your foot in the door. So how do you pick people, the great talents for your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think Yap Media has pretty been innovative in our origin story. So actually, we started as a group of volunteers. By episode 2, I had my first volunteer. His name is Timothy Tan. He's my business partner. He owns 10% of everything now. This was episode 2, literally just a month or so in. He reached out to me on LinkedIn and he was like, wow, I see, like, we went to the same college. I'm older than him, but he was still in college. And he's like, hey, I see what you're doing and like you're crushing it. And I just want to be a part of this. And so he was helping me with my images. And then, you know, I had other fans that reached out from the show. One guy's from California. His name's Hisham. And he's like, I just want to help you. And he ended up being my guest outreach lead and he would help me book guests. One guy from Atlanta was like, I love your videos. Like, can you teach me how to do it? Then he signed on as a volunteer and he did all my videos. And I had one guy from Estonia who managed my website. And I could just go on and on about these fans that were just reaching out like, I want to support the movement. What you're doing is incredible and so different. I just want to help you because I feel like what you're doing is so impactful. And so by episode 8, I had 10 volunteers in a Slack channel. And then we started an internship program. And every quarter, I'd hop on video on LinkedIn and be like, hey, do you want to learn how to podcast? Do you want to learn how to audio edit? Do you want to learn how to, make graphics and write social? And I would teach all these kids. And some of them were adults, 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds, and they would just intern for me. We weren't making any money. Like at this point, Young and Profiting Podcast, wasn't making much money. We were just keeping afloat, and we had this like volunteer team. So it was very easy to motivate people when there was no money involved. It was just all like, work 3-5 hours a week, and like we'll all be happy. And then I started getting paying clients, and that's when everything started to change. Then I had to like give stipends to my interns, make it more formal, start paying everyone. And it was like that was like a lot of growing pains to get from like volunteer mentality where it's like we all do what we can, and it's like we'll see how far we go. Like, no, this is a business, and we have priorities and clients, and we got to keep people happy. And so that was a big transition for us. But to answer your original question in terms of like how do you find employees now, internship programs. So typically what we do is we have an internship every quarter, and 5 to 7 interns join, and they get kind of round robined around the company. And after 3-4 months, if they do a great job, we hire them full time, and that way they're trained. I have a talent based business, so every time I get a new client, I have to stand up a social team for them, and so those people are already trained. They've been shadowing all my employees and everything like that. And then I can just hire them. They're already trained and they're ready to go. And honestly, a lot of the people that I hire are people who are out of college who can't get a job. And I teach them real skills, and whether they have a job with me or not after, they're set up for success. And it's one of the best things that I can do for young people is give them the skills that they can take with them and make money with as a freelancer or at another company or at my company.
That's interesting what you're saying, because I just had the conversation with someone in my network, and we talked about how to find the talent because he's doing recruitment. And I told him, I said, I think you can really test people with time. So that's exactly what you're doing, because someone who really wants to work for your mission, for your organization, they're going to be willing to wait and to put the time in, so to say, and they're not going to be attracted necessarily, I want the salary or the benefits immediately, and that's why I'm joining. But they're actually putting their time in, they're being tested in a way to see what they bring, and it's almost after that they get turned into employees. So I like that idea of try to hire, we call that, or something like that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%.
The rest of individuals who really want to do a good job and are motivated. But wow, I didn't realize, you've built all these teams and in your organization, and you have now grown so much recently even. So what are some of your next objectives or plans in the next future?
Yeah. So earlier this year, I launched a podcast network, and there's some big announcements that are coming out soon. We just got signed exclusive. And so, Yap Podcast, I have a couple businesses now. I have Yap Media Agency, which is a social media and podcast agency. My podcast itself is a business. A lot of people don't realize podcasts can be a business. I have 5-6 sponsors every episode. So my podcast itself is a business. And then I launched a podcast network because I grew and monetized 3 other shows, 3 other client shows, started a network, started recruiting more shows, and I take a rev share off of what I monetize for other shows. And so I have a business and entrepreneurship network called Yap Media Network. And that's my main focus now, growing those shows, getting them sponsorships, and really building out that part of the business, because it's basically has unlimited scale. My agency is based on talent. So every time we get a new client, I have to hire more employees. I have 60 employees already. I don't know if I want a bigger agency. It's a lot to manage. It's a lot of headache. And so the network is kind of like just scalable. The bigger we grow our shows, the more money we make. And so that's really exciting to me as a marketer. And I'm just like super bullish about our network. And that was actually my first goal. Like if you had asked me 5 years ago, where would Yap be? I would have said we're going to be the number 1 podcast in the world, and I'm going to have the biggest podcast network. The agency was just the mechanism to get there.
Wow, that's fantastic what you're doing, really. I mean, you've gone so far, in those couple of years. It's incredible.
Thank you.
How you were able to build your business and now find other ways. And I think it's interesting, and it will probably be very inspiring, because a lot of people now wondering, how do I start a business? What kind of business? And what I like about the online world is that it's unlimited, because you could pretty much monetize anything that you think is an idea and even create new models. And there's no end to it, I think. And that's what's great about it. And you just gave a few ideas tonight of what you could do with just taking a podcast and then finding sponsors and creating the agency and all that. I see a lot of podcasting. Sometimes they have a store as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's another way to monetize your podcast. I mean, again, the opportunities are there.
100%. I mean, podcasting is so cool because A, it lets you be a thought leader. B, it lets you meet people that you otherwise would not be able to meet because you have a platform, right? Me and you are meeting right now. Had you asked me, like, hey, Hala, do you want to have a cup of coffee? I'd probably be like, I don't have time. But you're saying, hey, like, I've got an audience. Like, I want to share your story. Like, let's have a conversation. To me, it's a win-win. I want to help. I want to help up-and-coming podcasters, and you're trying, right? You asked. So that's really important. And then also, you can sell on your podcast to your audience and to your guests. A lot of people miss that. They don't realize that making that connection with your guests builds so much trust, and they can end up being your clients. Almost all of our clients at Yap Media are former podcast guests.
Yeah, you get to know the person by just having a chat, and it's really again, it's win-win. Everyone
Yeah.
is learning from it, which is great. And I also learned so much from people I interview in general. You know, they all come from different walks of life, and what I try to do is really inspire, especially on this side of the world, people to take chances, to grow their skills, and that's exactly what you're explaining. I like the idea of the stacking the skills. This is really what people don't think about. You know, how do I package all my skills to grow my career, basically?
Yeah, skill stacking is incredible.
Great. Well, it was fantastic to have you. I think I really appreciate that. And by the way, I will post all the details below so that people can contact you in case they have questions or they want to learn more about what you do, because you are working worldwide. So it's always good to know that you never know. People can contact you and find out about your services and the agency and everything. So I wanted to thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say if you guys want, I would say the number one thing you can do is to listen to Young and Profiting podcast. I interview the brightest minds in the world. I unpack their advice. I do tons of research. I've had Matthew McConaughey on, Deepak Chopra, Seth Godin, Dave Asprey, so many great guests. So I'd love for you guys to check out Young and Profiting podcast if you want to level up your life. I think that's the number one way I can support everyone who's tuning in right now.
Yeah, I will post all the links so that you're easy to reach.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isabel.
You're welcome.